Well, hi everyone, and welcome to our second interview in our interview with network leaders for the AUCD Leadership Academy. I am really honored to have Dr. Diana Cejas from the University of North Carolina School of Medicine, the Department of Neurology, with us here today, and we'll learn a little bit about her background and her leadership skills and her conceptualization, her understanding and application of leadership. Also here with us today is Liz Weintraub from AUCD. So welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to Diana first to do a more in-depth introduction of herself. She wears many different hats within her university, and she will do a better job of explaining all of her different hats than I will. So I'll turn it over to you, Diana.
Okay, so hello, I'm Diana Cejas, and I am a pediatric neurologist at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I am also faculty at the Carolina Institute for Developmental Disabilities and kind of do wear a lot of hats. In my clinical career, I mostly take care of patients who have neurodevelopmental disabilities, things like autism, things like intellectual disability, and then on top of that, they have other kinds of neurological conditions like epilepsy, migraines, and things of that nature. So I take care of those patients in my clinic. Then I also do research through the Carolina Institute for Developmental Disabilities. And my research is really about trying to improve communication between healthcare providers and patients with neurodevelopmental disabilities. But really what I'm trying to focus on is that transition between adulthood and adolescence, and try to figure out how we can provide better healthcare for patients as they're moving from the pediatric healthcare system to adult healthcare system. Um, and in particular, I really like to try to understand what's going on and what kind of services patients who have these neurodevelopmental disabilities, what kind of services they need, particularly for marginalized groups. So various racial, ethnic minorities, low income communities, and things like that. Um, I also, I guess, on top of all of that, I'm really into advocacy, really around improving health outcomes for any kind of young adult with disabilities. Um, I myself identify as a person with a disability. I'm a cancer survivor, a stroke survivor, also chronically ill. I have migraines myself. So I feel a really strong personal and professional connection to advocacy. And the biggest thing that I do in terms of my own advocacy is digitally and through written word. I write a lot of creative nonfiction, essays, opinion pieces, things of that nature. I am sorry, I'm trying to keep my cat out of the screen, but she is persistent. Um, and I try to really just use my voice as much as I can to not speak for anybody but myself, but to kind of use my voice as an amplifier to kind of try to get my patients' messages out there and say, these are the things that we need. So that's me.
Great. Thank you, Diana. Well, we have a list of questions for you, but it's not intended to be a scripted, discussion. So feel free to take the conversation wherever makes sense. So I'll go ahead and start with the first question, which is what made you enter this work, the work that you do?
So medicine, in general, I've always known that I wanted to be a doctor. I never wanted to be anything else. Even when I was 5, I said I wanted to be a pediatrician. Um, and I'm very stubborn. So I kind of stuck to that. I don't think that I knew exactly why I wanted to be a doctor until I was much older. Um, and it really just came down to the fact that I wanted to help people and try to see if I could make some kind of difference. I mean, I was definitely interested in science and biology and nature, and I found the body very fascinating. But it keeps coming back to the fact that I like to be able to help people with a problem and try to help get them to a better place than they were before that they met me. Um, the neurology part was a surprise. I came into medical school and said, I'm going to be a pediatrician and that's what I'm going to do. I like taking care of kids. I like making sure that I can, try to help their families as a whole as well. Um, so when I came into medical school, I came in with the thought that I'm going to do general pediatrics and that's it. I'm very stubborn. But as we were learning about the different parts of the body, I just really was so interested by what was going on with the brain. And I tried to fight it for a while. I planned on going into general pediatrics. I did it like matched into a residency for general pediatrics. But within my first 3 months as a resident, if it was neurological, it came into my clinic. It showed up when I was on call. It showed up when I was on service. I got to see all these patients with all kinds of different neurological conditions. And after a couple of months of that, I was like, okay, I get it. I'm supposed to be a neurologist. And really, one of the things that you focus on in pediatrics is development. And I was just so interested by the way that different kinds of neurological issues could affect development in different ways. So I really just found myself so interested in seeing how many different types of ways people can develop, seeing how many different kinds of strengths people have, their own different neurological, I guess, setups. And I just felt like it was just a natural fit for me.
Thank you, Diane. And again, my name is Liz Weintraub, and I'll be taking the next question. What prepared you beyond former credentials for your current position?
I think this was a hard question for me to answer, but honestly, it also kind of isn't. I um, I had my critical illness when I was in training. So I actually found my tumor while I was in medical school, and it took several years for me to get a correct diagnosis. Um, and then I got very sick, um, found out that I had the cancer, had my stroke. All of this was happening while I was training to become a general pediatrician and a physician. And I think that that gave me a perspective which I didn't appreciate before, um, because I could actually, there are things that you learn about in medical school as being the appropriate things to do for a patient, like the kinds of treatments that you're supposed to give them. But unless you really have a personal connection, you don't understand what those treatments mean. I mean, I was used to sending my patients places like physical therapy, occupational therapy, but I don't think I really understood what happened there until I was the person who was receiving those kinds of therapy services. And I also don't think I understood, uh, frankly, just how bad physicians are with communicating with patients until people were trying to communicate with me. I don't think that I understood how the medical healthcare system doesn't really respect patient opinions as much as they should, and patient knowledge of their own kinds of skills, knowledge about their own body, until I started to have questions. And I think that me having some experiences, some of them were not that great, some of them were good experiences. But for me, I think it was a learning experience. And I think that I could take what I learned, take what I saw to be a better advocate for my patients, not just with them, because sometimes I think I can go into a room and I can honestly say to a patient who has migraines, I know how this feels. I have this too. I completely understand. And at the same time, I can go to my colleagues, maybe when I don't agree with how they're treating a patient, and say, maybe let's not do that procedure because it's painful. Or is there something else that we should be thinking about here? Is there something else that we're missing? And I think unless you have that kind of personal experience with illness, with disability, with what I call being on the other side of the bed, I don't think that you as a healthcare provider really understand what the patient is going through. And I'm not going to say that I understand everything that all of my patients are going through, but I think that gives me a unique perspective. Um, And it really has taught me a lot.
Thank you. I'm not sure that our people might be confused about frankly. I think that is a word that people might get confused with. So can you describe what you mean in this context?
Yes, I just mean to put something plainly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Emily?
Yeah, thanks, Liz, and thanks, Diana. So you've sort of spoken to this, but how can you describe sort of that transition in, you know, the first month of your position or the first year of your position, and again, you've spoken to the experience while you were going through medical school, and so how did that then, you know, how did that look when then you were transitioning into your current position?
It was challenging. I think that is the simplest way that I can say that. I think every time you move through your medical training, there's going to be a big change that you have to get used to. When you go from being a medical student to being a resident and you're a doctor in training, that's a whole new kind of responsibility that you have to get used to. You have to get used to making decisions for yourself for the first time. And then every time you move up, when you move up from residency to being a fellow, which is a doctor who's in training but has a little bit more responsibility, they're training to be a specialist. It's again, even more responsibility. I think it's a little hard for you to get used to because suddenly you have people who are coming up behind you who are looking to you to have answers and to be a leader. And then once you finish with your training completely, like I have, and you are an attending physician, which means that you can practice on your own. You don't have to go to anybody for any questions. You can see patients by yourself, and you're their doctor. It is very hard to get used to. Even now, I think it is very strange that people come to me for answers. They come to me with their questions, and not just my patients, but also the medical students and the residents behind me. And then also other doctors will come to me with questions. And I feel like it has been hard for me to get used to that because I think that for a long time, was someone who did not might see myself as a leader. I did not see myself as someone who was very assertive. I didn't see myself as someone who could take charge in a situation, even though I'm a doctor. I think it took a long time for me to get used to the idea that for some things, I am the expert in the room. And that means that I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm doing. And yes, I can answer those questions. Yes, I feel comfortable with making these plans and these treatments. And yes, I should feel comfortable standing up and saying, this is what I think, this is what I know. Um, so I'm not going to say, I feel like the first month for me has really been very prolonged, even though I've been in my position for over 3 years now. I still feel like I'm trying to get used to things. I still feel like sometimes I need to call out and ask for help from my mentors and from people who taught me. I hear that that is a very natural feeling in medicine and that it never really goes away, but you start to feel more confident as you are there for longer. So I think that the biggest thing in that first month is just adjusting to these responsibilities. And then on top of that, I am in a very unique position um, in that I was the first pediatric neurologist to come to the center where I worked. So I think that it was also a process for the people at the center to know what to do with me. Um, because have unique interests even for a pediatric neurologist. I don't I do some things like write that other doctors just don't do. And I think that people were very confused and weren't quite sure what to think about me at first. But I think even that we're learning, we're getting better. Um, and I think now I'm finally at that place 3 years later where I'm starting to feel like, okay, I know where I'm going. I know what I'm doing. And this is who I'm trying to be. This is the doctor that I'm going to be.
What does residency mean in this context? What does residency mean?
So, residency is training that you do after you graduate from medical school to become a certain kind of physician. Um, to become a pediatrician, you have to go through 4 years of medical school. Then you go into a residency program. And that residency program is what actually teaches you how to be a pediatric doctor, a doctor who works with children.
Okay, thanks. Can you name one challenge and just one that you had to confront and that you had to confront, and how did you deal with conflict?
So, one challenge I think I had to confront very early in my training was I had to start speaking up for myself. And this was immediately after I had my illness, and I was off of work for a few weeks after I became sick, just because at first I was in the hospital for a while, and then I had to be in rehab to learn how to use my hand and my arm again. And that was difficult. But when I first came back to work, I didn't feel comfortable asking for help, and not necessarily asking for help with doing the work that I needed to do, um, like making diagnoses and giving medications and things like that. I didn't feel comfortable asking for help for physical accommodations of my new disability, and I think that I tried to act like I was okay and act like everything was fine, even though I knew that it wasn't. And I quickly learned that I was just going to have to get through that. Um, because if no one was going to speak up for me, it was not going to happen. So I was very shy about it at first. I always apologized when I started to ask for accommodations. And I was very ashamed that I needed to ask for accommodations. And I think that there are lots of different reasons that I was ashamed, internalized ableism being one of those big reasons. Um, but after a while, I had to stop and say, wait, I'm not asking to not do my job. I'm just asking for the accommodations that my body needs so that I can be the best doctor that I can be. And once I took that step back and looked at the situation, I said, of course, I should be asking for accommodations. And of course, my bosses and the other people that I work for and work with should respect that I need these accommodations. There's no shame in that. So I just got to be a little bit louder about it. And I stopped apologizing for needing accommodations. This is the body that I have. This is me. This is who I am. And if you're going to work with me, then you're going to have to accept all of me.
Thank you. I love that answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Diana. So I'm going to shift the conversation to discuss strengths. And so we use the VIA strengths assessment during our academy. What do you see your strengths in leading, in leadership? And then what do you see, a second question, what do you see as your lesser strengths and how do you compensate for them?
So, and I was trying to, before this interview, I was trying to go find my old strengths assessment. But just off the top of my head, the first thing that I think of as being a strength for me is that I'm very creative. And I've been that way since I was very little. And I don't tend to look at a problem the same way other people might look at a problem. I tend to also come up with solutions to problems that maybe other people don't think about. Um, I think that that kind of creativity it's really necessary for me, and it's necessary for me to do the kind of work that I do, because we don't we as physicians and scientists and researchers don't really understand everything that the brain does. So sometimes we can't just think, oh, because the brain is, this person is having this symptom, that means that we have to do it this way. Well, it doesn't always work like that. Sometimes you will expect someone to have, someone who has a certain medical problem to act a certain way, and their body just doesn't. So I think that thinking about things in a creative way, trying to think, if it's not this, then what else could I do? Or is there something else that I could try? I think that it really helps me professionally. And then, of course, it helps me with my writing. I think writing is one of my biggest creative outlets. And even there, I don't quite write like a lot of other doctors do. A lot of doctors will write in a very scientific way. Those who have publications will have these kind of academic publications. And I have those, but I tend to write more um, what they're called like lyrical essays. So things that are kind of like an essay and kind of like a poem, but all together. And sometimes when I tell my doctor friends that about the things that I write, or they read the things that I write, they're like, this is very strange. I think it's just a new way to tell the same kind of a story, to kind of show it doesn't have to be that we talk about medicine and the body in this very dry, matter of fact way. You can talk about the body, you can talk about disability, you can talk about chronic illness and use really beautiful words to talk about it, even though so many people they say that those things are bad. They're not. You just have to talk about them in a real way. And sometimes real ways can be beautiful ways. Um, if I'm thinking about what are some of my weaknesses, my biggest weakness is still, even though I just told you I stand up for myself now, I still second guess myself quite a bit. I still want to ask a lot of questions. I still, even if an answer to a problem comes to me immediately, I still am like, oh, I don't know if that's right. Oh, oh, I should look that up. Oh, maybe I should ask someone, and I don't trust myself. And I think that that is something that I probably will have to keep working through. I don't know if I think my personality is just that way. And I think that it's something that I'm aware of. I'm aware that I do it. Um, and I think it's something that I'm going to have to keep in mind every time I come into a position where I'm coming in as the leader. I have to remind myself that yes, I can do this. Yes, if I have a question, it's okay to ask the question. But yes, I have something to say, and I'm going to say it.
Thank you. And it's so interesting about um, your when you see as your strength um, and your weaknesses. Do you think that plain language is important for our work?
I absolutely do. Um, I think that it is very important to be as intentional about uh, being inclusive. And being inclusive means making sure that everyone uh, who is in our community, in the disability community, um, is able to understand the things that we're talking about, so that we're able to say those things in a very clear way. Um, I think for my job in particular, plain language is very important because I work with people with all kinds of different kinds of intellectual disabilities, cognitive disabilities, people who have a harder time processing information quickly. Some people who can understand what's said to them, but not what's written. Some people who can understand what's written, but who have a hard time understanding what's being said. So I think that it's really important um, to make sure that people understand what it is that we're trying to say and to use language that is as clear as possible so that we can make sure that the message is getting to everyone and so that everyone has a chance to participate in these kinds of talks and be advocates for themselves.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Next question is, what is one thing, big or small, that has made you proud recently?
Well, um, I did just have a another essay that came out at the beginning of the week, which I wasn't expecting that to come out, but it's an essay that I really loved very much because it's unusual, even for me, kind of essay. And I wrote it about some of the women in my family and how they helped me when I got sick. And it was just a very important essay to me. Um, and as I found out that that essay was getting published, I was in a meeting with a bunch of other people, and we were actually talking about advocacy and how physicians can be better advocates for kids and young adults with disabilities. And one of the people actually was, as I'm seeing this email come up saying, "Oh, your essay is coming out," a person on the call was like, "Oh, hey, I also just got this book. Does anybody know if it's any good?" And it was Disability Visibility, which was edited by Alice Wong. And I was like, "Oh, hey, yeah, by the way, one of my essays is in that book." So I felt very proud of myself. Um, because again, sometimes when you tell doctors that you write creatively, they don't quite understand why or what that means. But here I am in a meeting with other doctors. Someone says, "I just read this book. Do you think it's any good?" And I'm like, "My essay's in that book. Yes, I think it's very good. And you should read all the rest of those essays too." So I guess it was the one time in a long time that my two kinds of interests, writing and medicine, oh, three, I guess, because disability is in there too, and they all came together at once. And I was just so happy for the rest of the day.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question is, would you like to offer any advice to the group of leaders who will be watching this as they continue on their leadership trajectory or path?
Yes, I would say uh, that you all have something to say. Trust that you all have something to say, and trust that you can be a leader even if you don't think that you can. I think that it's hard, especially for people who have disabilities, people who have chronic illnesses, people who belong to other groups like minorities, people of other gender identities, people who have other kinds of groups that they identify with, really anybody who has been told at one point that their voice doesn't matter or that they don't count. I think it's hard for those of us who belong to any of those groups to really think, oh, if I see a problem, I can stand up and I can say something and I can make a difference. I think that everyone should just know that they have something to say, know that they have some kind of thing that they can contribute and that it has a value. Um, and also know that people probably will try to tell you, no, you can't be a leader. No, you can't do this. No, you can't stand up for yourself. But trust, know that if you see a problem and you know it's a problem, it's okay for you to say, that's a problem and I can do something about it. And believe in yourself even when other people don't, because other people won't sometimes. And I think the more uh, groups that you identify with, I guess marginalized groups that you identify with, have disabilities, if you're from one of these minority groups, you're going to feel people push back at you a lot. But keep going, believe in yourself, keep speaking up. Um, because, yeah, you have something to say too.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Diana. We really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and wisdom with us.